You're currently at sort of the We Are Movement office in Stockholm, also very close to the King, of course, and the We Are Movement. This is our place. And my name is Starendal. I know a good bunch of you, but just to rehash, I founded this small company, We Are Movement, together with Emanuel and Fredrik a few years ago, trying to advise on how to build things that's never been built before, how to lead when you can't plan away the uncertainty, and how to solve really hard problems. Our job is to teach, to help, to manage, to mentor, and to support you in doing these awesome things, basically. And tonight, we're going to touch on 3 topics together. One, this is a lab. So I want to reference a little bit why did I call it a lab? What's it about? Because this is not a solution. What we're doing tonight is starting something. So we want to start exploring something together. So this is the first thing in a series. And the other thing, since this is a lab around leadership, I want to discuss that darn word. Like, what the heck does it mean, leadership? What do I imply with that? Because that's a very tricky word. It means everything and nothing at the same time. And that's a huge problem. And one of the big purposes of this lab is to elaborate on that and build something meaningful around it. And last but not least, we're going to explore one model as part of this lab. And we're going to switch that out each time that we do a lab. And touch on a model, a piece of research, something that might be useful, and dive into it and maybe fiddle with it a little bit, like you do in a lab, and see what happens. So that's the purpose of today. And don't worry, there's pizza in 27 minutes. So I think we'll be fine. And there's going to be a few lightning talks on applying that specific model in an agile context today, but I want to set the frame around the lab and leadership first. Okay, so why a lab? Well, my entire career has been trying to build really hard things. I started out as a music producer, producing record albums for 10 years. I was a game producer. I built business software. The thing that's been connecting these dots is that I've been making coffee for very talented people. That's my entire career in a nutshell. That's how I literally would explain it. So if someone asked me at Christmas, Carl, what do you do at work? Like, my entire life has been coffee, actually. Sure, I do other things sometimes, but that's the gist of it. I'm trying to build and solve problems that haven't been solved before. We're building a product no one has built before. How do you plan away that uncertainty? You don't. You get people to do it for you. And specifically, I've done it with a lot of people. Sometimes 20, sometimes 200, sometimes 400. And what I've learned is it is darn hard. You know that. You're practical people. What the coffee thing is actually called leadership. So I built, I think We Are Movement is my 6th startup, I think. The others failed, actually. This is the only one that succeeded. I built foundations, NGOs. I've been a senior executive. I've been a line manager. I've been all over. And the only thing I've learned is this is really hard. I wish I knew more about this leadership thing. Can someone please explain to me? So the last few years, I spent a lot of time trying to also research, how does this actually work? What's available? What knowledge do we have in the academic world? What models are out there? What tools are there? So as part of a research project the last few years, I have as a goal to actually attend every single leadership course taught in Sweden. I'm about halfway through. It's horrible. It's monstrous. My 2 co-founders at Movement call it, yes, that thing. It's some kind of abuse problem. What are you doing, actually, Carl? Why do you do this to yourself? And one thing is to learn, yes, but another one is to also learn how do we talk about this concept. And let me tell you what's out there, that not everything that is said about this is meaningful. So I want to explore what is meaningful, what is useful for you, and from that build something together with you guys and girls. So the idea here is that we need an approach for leading and managing these knowledge organizations to build and solve problems for the future. And that needs to be fit for purpose. So we need to take the best and the greatest and the latest from the world of research, empirically proven models, and make it useful. That's the idea. And the trick is, I don't have the answer, but I'm thinking you might have it. We might have it together. So the lab is the place to explore that. So the vision here is that over the coming year, we're going to together elaborate on that. So collaborate and build out models and ideas that will be fully publicly available and free that others can use. So you have tons of tools in this area that you use. well, maybe share them with the others. Maybe look through them together and see what is actually reusable, free, available. There's tons of it out there. So this will be the first of a series of physical meetups like this, but come Monday, I'm going to invite you online to start discussing, arguing, even into joint collaboration sessions where we write articles and build tools together. So this is the start of something. But what about that word? That troublesome leadership word. Everyone uses it, no one knows what to actually make of it. So I'm just going to throw you into the deep end. And you got a small task when you came in, which was to find someone you haven't met before, say hi, and then find the connection. It's the first little act of leadership. Like, hey, I'm going to be brave and say hi. You're trying to connect. So I'm going to do it again with someone close to you in the room, someone that you haven't talked to that much maybe. And you two will, over a few minutes, elaborate this question. I won't give you any context, just who is the leader on this boat? And that's a Swedish party boat, right? Mariella, classic. It's for the people who don't know, it's sort of a floating casino, and you sleep on it, you do other things on it, and then you get really drunk, and you don't talk about what happened on the boat. So it goes back and forth between Finland and Sweden. So given your current understanding of leadership, who is the leader on this boat? Is it several people? Is it different roles? What is it? So try it out. 4 minutes with someone close to you, in pairs, in groups of 2, and then how would you answer this question? Ja, det är bara att köra. Det är så lugnt så. Precis rätt folk, precis rätt mängd, jättebra väder, bra personal.
För det är dålig vädring när man är mer än 20 personer.
Japp, det är en bra tanke. Man kan till och med vara proaktiv där, som du säger. Toppfönstren.
Som inte kanske riktningen av båten.
Jo,
Så det sen ankomst.
Ja, men det i rätt tid.
Sen låst. Men ni går
ja, exakt. Vi stänger vid 6. Allt bra med dig?
Det är bra. Jag är här nu.
Ja, det låter bra. Och tack för senast.
Ja, men det var jättekul.
Väldigt energigivande och med kunnig kontext. Och...
Det blir kul. Exakt.
Hej Johanna.
Hej. Hur är läget? Jo, det är bra.
Ja. Du släppte in Johan.
Alltså, jag kunde inte släppa in Johan. Jag hade ingen kod.
Var ingen kod?
Det hände ingenting när jag bytte, så jag måste lösa det.
Ja. Vet du vad jag gjorde idag? Jag använde gymmet här nere. Det är jättebra. Det finns bastu till och med. Jag rekommenderar. Vi har gym på jobbet visar sig. Jag har ingen aning. Ni har ju till och med träningsmål.
Ja, men jag coachar det superlyxigt. Det är för studerande.
Ja. Grymt. Ja, det är bara att ta på det du vill ha. Det blev rätt folk och rätt mängd. Ibland har man tur. Alltså det där är inte ett problem som är så lätt löst. Alltså. Ja, jag är bara helt... Skulle du kunna skjuta av lite bilder idag, tror du? Snällt.
Jag köra iPhone.
Ja, men det är så. Jag tar den kameran så funkar bra för dig. Ja. Ja, just det. Oskar, när ni kör igång sen, kan du flytta dig lite så att du sitter med huvudet rakt framför kameran? Okej, och flytta på sig det. Så. So it sounds like it wasn't this simple. It's the captain. It sounded like it was more than just that realization, right? A little bit more. So we're going to come back to this. So hold on to those thoughts. I'm going to come back to those in a moment. So given that we have a certain context and a question around the loaded word leadership and leader and on a boat, let's dive into what do I actually mean by leadership then? What's my definition here? Just make it a little bit more crisp. And this is a very complex phenomenon, but we can start in the academic world. And these two studies, I always go back to those. I think they're good. One is the Globe study from '99. One is the UCL study from 2002, talking about this phenomenon that we call leadership and so on. It's bound to a context. So we're sharing, we're trying to achieve something together. So we're a family. We're trying to have a nice cruise together. We form an organization. There's some shared context. And within that context, the first one, someone is trying to get energy into someone else. We have a pet shop together, and I have this feeling that hamsters is great. And I want everyone else in the pet shop to go like, we should be the #1 hamster place in Stockholm. That is an act of leadership. I'm trying to move someone else in the direction of a shared context. But also, to broaden the aperture, it's much more complex than just opinions or feelings. This is also about the shape of the context, seen in the UCL study. The process of figuring that out is also a leadership action. And also, the environment that you're in also acts as a leadership vessel, meaning that that shapes the behavior. The facilitating individual and collective efforts. That's not only something a human does, that can also be done by the environment or the systems that we interact with. So this is not only, hey, I'm the captain. This is a much broader perspective. And also, in the lab, when we talk about leadership, or when I mention it, I will use it to go for both of these two things. Traditionally, they have been separated sometimes. They all get misused, confused, abused. So I've been a manager, and I've been a leader, and I've been both. But when I talk about leadership here, I'm talking about both phenomena. Because if I'm a formal manager, chef in Swedish, it means that I have a responsibility imbued by the context to be responsible for a process, a door. I control it opening or closing, something. That's a job bound by that context. But I can also be a leader without having that role. I might have opinions about things, I want to influence others, but I have no formal authority. That's still an act of leadership. So, can you be a manager without doing any leadership? Oh, yes, you can. Works perfectly. If the context is really simple, and the door needs to open and close on set times, if that would work, yes, maybe. If you're trying to solve more complex problems, moving the human system is also needed. But you can be a fully established leader in a context without having any formal chef's role or managerial responsibility. But I will reference those fluidly when I talk about leadership or leaders. So it's not the one or the other. Both are needed. So, what about that darn boat? So thinking through that, given those definitions, can someone give me an example of a leader on this boat? If you had used off the boat, that's a very picky word. So, Denise, come on, give me someone who is a leader on the boat.
Shall we say yes? We hope the individuals are, because they are leading themselves in whatever they are. There are, of course, groupings of individuals, such as the steward and the bartender, boss, and the restaurant boss. But if you look at the guests...
maybe the passengers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at them, they might come in a group, like a hen party. Yeah. They would have a bride and then we have someone leading it. However, if you're thinking about the individual's actions, they're leading themselves. How much shall I drink? Do I actually dance with that dude?
But if you're a passenger on the boat and someone is really rowdy, you might go, can you calm down? Active leadership done in context by the passenger. So that might be a leader on the boat.
Yeah.
Good one.
Individuals, that's what we said together.
Any other examples? A leader on the boat? Only passengers?
Oh, the boat.
A person who can lead that the boat keeps on going.
Yes.
Exactly. It could be even a formal role on the boat, right? Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of those, like head of engineering, a manager who acts like a leader. That could happen, right? Even a captain who is responsible for the lives of the people on the boat. A managerial role who might be acting as a leader or not. Just he or she chooses, right? But a challenge for you then. What about the designer of the ship? Is that a leader?
He's dead.
She's dead. We don't know that. Or do you know this? So how would that person be a leader of shape the behaviors of people on the boat? Give me an example.
Now you gave a definition of leadership, shaping behaviors.
Yeah, well, it's gonna. Erik?
By designing the ways people move on the boat, you exercise leadership.
Yeah, that's an act of leadership. It is. And even the shape of the keel is one of those things that will, once you've taken those decisions, that's just it. And that will constrain how the boat behaves in turbulent water. So you're seeing stressed out passengers. Is it because they're Aquarius and it's Tuesday? Could be. Or it could be because the darn boat is going like this. And that's because of a decision around the shape of the keel taken 20 years ago by someone on a piece of whiteboard. So the architect is also a leader in here, but that happens on a different level. So here's the trick. When we think about leadership, we tend to get stuck on a reductionistic view, which isn't wrong. I fully agree with this. This is my word for that. The human angle, what the individual does. And this is an academic term, direct leadership. We will use it a lot for this lab. This is a highly important thing. This is what I do, how I show up. This is when I lead people through my interactions. When they can read the email I sent, or when they can interpret what I do, or try to interpret when I say hamsters are super cool, right? Like, oh, he's trying to control me now? I like cats. That is an act of direct leadership. So that happens in a smaller context. So when we can share the environment, when we can see each other, when we can interact. Plenty of tools. Most of the leadership research in the world is done here. There's metric tons of data on this. And this is skills we need to have. These are good things. There's trainings, there's tools, there's plenty. We will talk about it later today, one of them. The trick here is, though, whenever I talk to organizations about leadership, we tend to get stuck here. So an organization talks to me, says, Carl, can we talk about leadership? And I go, yes. What do you want? And I go, can you help our leaders to become better at coaching? Giving feedback? Being more nice? Like, is that leadership? I go, yeah, according to our definition, it is. It's how we behave with others and how we impart direct leadership. And immediately I go, I agree. These are important skills. But if you want to build a leadership capability, this is not enough. This is the starting point. That's a little bit of a problem here. So if you want to understand leadership at the boat, you also need to view other perspectives, like this one. Indirect leadership. Again, academic term. I don't know if this is from the Swedish Defense University, but there's some bubbling research here. So I would lean on that and also on the MIT Systems Group here. I think it's a neat term. Basically encapsulating the leadership happening like the shape of the keel. How do I interact through multiple layers and also with broken time loops in between? How do I lead through that? Often through others. You have 10,000 people in your organization and you want to get someone else to feel that hamsters are great. You have to work through others. It's just going to be that somewhere 3 managerial layers away, someone's going to go, hamsters? Why? And that working through filters, working through intermediaries is one of the goals. And the other one, the arrow on the side, also some good research in Sweden on that. Image. basically how others perceive you at a distance. I'm always thinking about the president in the Ukraine right now. Whenever you see him on TV, does he have a suit? No. It's almost combat fatigue, so at least green clothes. Why? Can't they afford a suit? He's the darn president, come on. What's he trying to do here? Sending a message. It's real, I'm here with you. Imagine that he flew around the world trying to talk to us, drinking champagne on a private jet. No, he is not leading them. So he understands that the persona, the projection is also an act of leadership. You can reach pretty far with that one. And also understanding the shape of the environment. This is the systems thinking tools, understanding how your mental models create structures and vice versa. Those are tools for indirect leadership. Also a huge part of it. Problem though, this, not as much models and research around this. There's also a final thing we're going to reference in this lab throughout the year, which is a little bit here where I'm more on a loose end here. So I'm going to just call it out. There's going to be leadership things in the boat, you touched a little bit on it, Denise, that are emergent in nature, meaning that there is no single contact point for them. They're not constrained by your actions or by others. A very simple one is a phenomenon like hope, for example. In an organization, that can make or break an organization, but it doesn't have a single, you can't reduce it to, it comes from Anna. It's the actions of the CEO. It's not, it's this higher order leadership phenomenon that pushes and pulls itself. So tillit in Swedish, trust, also one of those indirect, not even emanating for a single point. You can't really reduce it down to causal links directly. It's truly like the soap in the bathtub. But working with it, unless you have tools for it, you're going to struggle. So here, I'm postulating that there is opportunity here. When we're working outside and inside the system without interacting with it as the single point of friction or contact, you still need to work with it. Imagine that you are in an organization and that there's a really bad mood in it. How do you address that? How do you start working with it? Well, you can be a really nice manager yourself. It's going to make a small dent in your local working group. You can think about, is there a process, something that's broken? Should I have better clothes? What's going on here? It's really hard to deal with those things from a leadership perspective only through indirect and direct means. Here, we're going to lean instead, I think, on complex adaptive systems, working with constraints and enablers, and looking for tools to understand emergent behaviors. There is some bubbling research on it. I like the Swedish research on tillit, for example, is really looking good. And there's some international research around you can even draw from physics and look at constructor theory or assembly theory and so on. And there are some good things to work with there. So this is very much an open aperture, saying, this we know a lot about. We can probably get that done pretty quickly. This is harder, but there's some research done. Here we probably need to work with fringes, stuff on the edges. But all three perspectives are perfectly valid and useful when you lead out there. That's at least my hypothesis for this lab. Not only this one, where we tend to get stuck. And the fun thing, I get to hang out with all three groups. Usually there are even pools of people. So I have a huge group of experts in direct leadership. And whenever we meet, they want to sit in a group and throw balls across and say their names. I'm kidding. A lot about interpersonal dynamics, like can we talk openly? Good tools, good perspectives. And whenever I talk about more, they go like, no, it's all about people, and people interactions. Great. What about these? They go like, we don't know what that is. Okay, we have a problem. And then I hang out with the systems thinkers, and they go, that direct stuff, that's just, everything is driven through the system. Come on, the human behavior is just shaped by the system, so we don't care about that. But there's good stuff over there. And then we have the complexity people. Whenever I talk about leadership, they just throw their hands up and go, this is a very complex phenomenon, Carl. You can't understand it. It's impossible, actually. It's no use. I'm like, but what about the direct? No. And I agree. I'm like, you are all three correct. There's a need for an integrated view here. All three are valid at different zoom levels. If you want to take a math analogy, plus and minus, the multiplication table, you need to know that. Algebra, a little bit more complex. Oh yes, can still be learned. Maybe you're up to differential equations or even nonlinear, like chaos theory and so on. But problem here, many people want to go there, day one. Like, this looks cool. I'm like, yeah, good luck, you're going to break a leg doing that. Basics, advanced, oh yes, pretty cool, but building on the basics. So my idea to explore all three together. That's for the coming year at least. So all goes into the lab as a sort of a mix, I'm thinking. And today then, we're going to zoom in on a model, actually Swedish, here from Stockholm. So one of my, for direct leadership, where we're starting, this one, called the leadership model from the Swedish Defense University. I've looked across the entire world, and this is by far one of the best research-based models for starting to think about direct leadership, because it opens the aperture to indirect and emergent behaviors also. So this is a good one to start with. If someone asks me, like, where do I start, Carl? I'm like, yes, here somewhere. That's wide enough, but still precise enough to give you some leverage. Several of you are familiar, but we're going to dive into it in a moment. So just going to give you a very broad overview before pizza. And it's basically built by the Defense University to understand what does good direct leadership look like in a context where there is change, where things aren't super static. And it says basically there's a few interpretations of behaviors here that we can classify. And remember, your intent sort of matters for you, but not for the leadership. It's how it exists in the context. If I run into the testing department screaming about an important incident, and they feel that I'm over-controlling them, that is the leadership that's actually happening. If I think I'm like this, I'm just engaging with the team. Like, no, it's a total dick. Like, that's actually the leadership. I can have all the intent I want, but it exists in context. So what they've done is looking at the role model, the individualized care, the inspiration and motivation, saying here is super useful things. When what you're doing is perceived as this in the direct leadership domain, then you might have good results, especially if it is supported by the need to sort of seek agreements around the work, take necessary actions. But also, a really neat one with this, modeling also, what does bad look like? Over control, carrot and stick. When your knowledge workers feels that you're doing that, motivation just sinks out through the floor and you lose energy and results. And also the destructive parts. Yelling, demeaning, threatening, over-demanding, the stuff we've seen out there, actively destructive. Quite dangerous, but also really poor for results, actually. But a really neat one with this, also the research around the passive part. When you have responsibility for something, but you just don't give a shit, and you don't delegate it, and you don't create an environment where that could happen. It just creates fear. Like, what targets should we have for the coming year? I don't know. Just work really hard. Oh, yeah. Like, oh, where are we going? Everywhere. Like, okay. Yeah, just make sure you don't make any mistakes. Like, super scary stuff. And that, if you look at the data, turns out that it's actually worse than being a total asshole. Which is interesting. You would be like the yelling person. What you can see is that people, when they have someone like that, they all sort of join, he's an asshole or she's an asshole. So we all agree on that at least, right? Okay. But when you have the passive part, everything just becomes a floating sort of bucket of nothing. And that's really threatening. The neat part about the model, it works as a debugging chart. So at the base part, we have, when I look, where does the behavior come from? How is it interpreted? The context and you are both relevant here. So it opens up. Maybe it is the keel. The environment is part of it. Maybe it is what you bring to the room. Maybe it is the structure of the group or how it works together. So there's plenty to think around when you're looking for why does this happen. But it gives a clear message also around how, when behaviors are perceived in a certain way, what could happen then, good and bad perspective. So with that, we're going to head into pizza. And I'm going to give you a small job while you pizza, which is to, together with your new friend, you're basically going to talk about what do you know about this model Maybe you've attended a course, you've read the book, you're familiar with the research. What do you know about that and agile methods combined? Have you tried it? Do they match? Is this a miss? From a direct leadership perspective, is this a good tool or not? So it's going to be half an hour. It's going to be pizza in the other room. There's plenty of wine here. And you're going to team up with the person you talked about the ship with and solve that riddle together. Okay, good luck. See you in half an hour.